All right, welcome to Chapter 9, Recruiter Retention. So we're bringing it all together, building a business that runs without you.
A real business.
Yes,
Ultimately, a real business. Liberation.
Let's just jump right in with what is the best way to execute the hiring process?
So again, we talked about the reasons people don't hire. They believe it's expensive. They believe there's a bunch of limiting beliefs around hiring's too expensive. It takes too long and nobody wants to work hard anymore, right? And those, when I hear expensive and nobody wants to work too hard, and actually even when it takes too long, it means there's no systems and processes for it. There's no defined outcomes for it. If you hire 100 people, 100 people aren't going to work out. If you hire 100 people the right way, most of them will. And most of them will be profitable, even if they leave you 3 to 6 months down the road. And I just see so many owners stay in a mode of really plateauing from an ability standpoint, which means they end up very bored with the business. They end up kind of on like a hamster on a treadmill. And they've stopped really intellectually growing into the role of an owner of a search firm. And so an owner of a search firm is not just being a great recruiter. An owner of a search firm in a scalable operation means he or she can replicate themselves through other people. And that's kind of what we're really talking about in this moment. It's not just recruiter retention. It's a recruiter attraction, selection, onboarding / training and retention, but it's under, we can only fit so many in the Venn diagram. So it's kind of fits into that model.
Exactly. So what would a standard hiring process look like for a firm owner?
One is they don't have a standard hiring process. So step one is have a standard hiring process. So you create one. It doesn't have to be complicated. And again, this is systematized, meaning my experience with myself when I was doing it the wrong way, and my experience with other clients we've worked with is it's like, okay, it's time to hire. Maybe we should post an ad. Maybe we should do this. But it's create a standard hiring process, meaning there's a finding and attraction phase, there's an interview process, and there's an offer and closing process. And it's done the same every time. So it's just like pulling out a playbook. Oh, it's time to hire. Let's pull out the playbook. Step one, post the ad. LinkedIn or on a job board, or even in in a local Facebook group or local newspaper, that's online. For example, people still search for work. And as we talked about in the other chapter, I'd rather train than retrain. I prefer to have someone without experience in recruiting. So what's the attraction phase? So it's not just posting. That's not going to work. Part of finding an attraction is having a great employee referral program. Incentivize your employees to bring great talent to you to interview. Number two is have a recruiting process. I know this is foreign to most recruiting firm owners. Actually go out and can do what you do for a living for yourself. So, we would contact companies like ADP or Paychex. We would contact we would recruit out of local computer services companies where they were selling commodity-based products. Or you can do a search for like Series 6, Series 7. That's all public information. People earlier in their careers where they're struggling because building up a successful financial services practice takes a long time. And then either yourself or what I would really coach is that you have somebody as part of their role that does recruiting for you. And they just do, they reach out to passive candidates, and that's a pool. All the things together, and those are just 3 examples of active recruiting, employee referrals, and posting in ads will give you a consistent flow of candidates to have a big enough pool to pick from. And then once you have the attraction phase, you have the interview process phase. Again, it should be the same. There should be an agenda for the first interview, the second interview, and the offer. Ours first interview was always on the phone with me, and it was always them in replying to the ad, or if it was a recruit, why were they interested in the position? Step 1, step 2, if I liked that call. Step 2 was a face-to-face interview, and there was an agenda for the second interview. And then the final interview was meeting with somebody on our team. And if I could get a signal from my team member, kind of making an offer. And here's what I see at the, which leads us to the offer and closing process. A lot of we're recruiters. We know people can take counter offers. We know people can take competing offers. So do you have a process in place to close the candidate? Meaning, I want their commitment. I'm going to make you an offer. And if you say yes, I want that yes to be a commitment because I'm going to release the other candidates, the backup candidates for this role. And you're going to start 2 weeks from today. I'll put together a written offer. Do I have your commitment? It's tying them down just like you would a candidate on a search. So it's really going, an interview process has very specific steps. And the beauty of this is it's a system and you can calendar it. So you can plan on when you're going to do your training and onboarding.
From what I've heard from, some clients is, that whole process, yes, it's a big part of it, but what falls apart is then the onboarding. So what are the qualities of a great new recruiter onboarding program to make sure that this new hire sticks?
And this is where most owners begin to develop I can't find anyone who's willing to work hard, because they'll say, watch this training and do these things. And there's rarely any specifics behind it or bound by timeframes. So what you want to do is, what is the outcome that you want from an onboarding program in what period of time? So, with my firm and what we recommend with our clients is, okay, there's defined outcomes for the first 2 months, then more specifically then for the first month, and then the first 2 weeks, the first week, the first day, right? So when you back it all in, with us, our training program, the content-wise was a day and a half. Day 2 afternoon, they were on the phone with a very specific objective. Day 3 was heavy phone work with a very specific expectation of exactly how many people they were going to talk to. For us, it was 15. And most people go, in the 2020s, that's impossible. No, we have clients doing it today. To do that, there has to be a very good plan in place for them. It's not that by talking to 15 people, they're going to be perfect in 3 days. It's what we want to do is compact all the failures as quickly as possible to get a feeling for the business. So defining the outcomes. What do we want at the end of the first week? At the end of the first week, I want them to have hit, in a first full week, I want them to have talked to 75 people. I'm going to sit down with them every day for a half hour to 45 minutes and review the calls. I'm going to listen to some of the recorded calls and give them feedback. And then again, when you're defining the outcome of the overall program is, if it's a recruiter, at the end of 2 months, they'll be able to take a quality search assignment. They'll be able to get an exclusive and or maybe even money up front. At the end of 30 days, as if their role is finding and developing talent, can they take a quality data sheet? And a quality data sheet for X firm means these characteristics. For me, it was always, they can clearly identify a motive for someone to change. They can clearly match the skill set that the candidate has with the assignment we have. Those are just a couple. And last but not least, very specific numbers and activity. This is why people fail. Owners don't set very specific accountabilities in the training program for activity. And if they do, they don't have an accountability or a consequence process. For us, if somebody did less than 15 after 1 or 2 warnings, they were terminated. And a lot of people, when they hear me say that, they'll say, well, that's a little brutal. I only fired 2 or 3 people in the first couple of weeks. People get the message very quickly when you set the accountability the right way. So a successful onboarding program has specific timeframes, specific outcomes that you want, and a specific schedule for when you're going to do certain things.
I like that you're very specific about the accountability, because that's one of the biggest things for success is if people aren't clear on what they're accountable for, and you're not clear, you don't know if it's a skill issue or if it's a motivation issue. Exactly.
One of the things I did, and I did it wrong for a long time. And I had the typical owner whine, WHINE, and complaint was, no, people don't want to work hard. I don't understand why they won't just fill in the blank. And what I looked at, because I was tracking metrics, I just wasn't using them to their best ability, I was tracking metrics, and I went back and I looked at up to that point, the people I hired and how many made it. 1 out of 20 were really successful in spite of my weak training and development. This was in the early to mid 90s. So meaning they had all the internal dials filled in and they were going to succeed in spite of me. And kind of when I talk to other owners, people left to their own devices, it's a 5% success rate. It doesn't mean only 1 in 20 will make it as a recruiter. 1 in 20 was wildly successful without accountability. When I went to accountability, 3 out of 5 were wildly successful and 2 were okay. It totally changed the number. I mean, it was thousands of percentage points of improvement, simply running the same training program, combining it with accountability.
How do you motivate your team?
So once they're up and running, think about it. If you're a tenured owner, there's things and times of the things you do where you get bored. You know, there's elements of the role, just in any role, where one doing the same thing over and over again, the challenge is gone. What may have been challenging a year or two ago ceases to lose its challenge. This is where, if it's not properly addressed, a big billing tenured person may want to go off on their own. Because I think if they're on their own, it'll be a bigger challenge, which it will be a bigger challenge. You as the owner, I always looked at myself as the owner of, I had to be version 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 of them. And so even when I took myself off a desk, I never stopped studying marketing and selling. It was always one to add more value to them so that they knew working for me, they could close more business than they were off on their own. And then there comes a time, generally around with a recruiter, when they hit about $250,000, where you can leverage them, meaning you hire somebody to develop candidates for their searches in the role that we kind of talked about in the other chapter called search associate. Once you build a team underneath of them, with me, when I built teams, I never lost a team leader. They actually became the people that bought out my company. But the way to motivate them is always raise their level of challenge, because just like you got tired of taking data sheets, most of them are going to get tired of taking data sheets on candidates. And it's not that they ever stop. It's their role now is getting more assignments at a higher level, which is probably what they're good at, number one. And number two, helping to develop this other person. In addition to that, it's investing in training. It's sending them to conferences, virtual or in person. And lastly, running contests. And kind of a rule of thumb is invest 2 to 3% of your gross revenue into things that are incentives and contests. Things like a rewards trip, if they had a certain level of billings, a President's Club type of trip, where you take them maybe to some place like Hawaii or the Caribbean or a resort for 3 or 4 days. You can also, we ran a number of contests where we rewarded the activities that led to placements, job orders, first-time interviews. We created points for that, created kind of incentives around that. The combination of those things with constantly growing them in their career is one of the ways, a few of the ways to keep them motivated.
Developing people into leaders of their own teams is really powerful in building your business. Also, the recognizing of performance. Can you share just a little bit about the contests you do to get time off, since time is one of the biggest and most precious assets that one can be granted?
Yeah, that's a really good question. If you Google or research motivating things for people, especially when they're kind of somewhat satisfied with their financial goal, the biggest motivator then is extra time off. So in the recruiting industry, the week between Christmas and New Year's, the week around 4th of July are usually 2 weeks, generally an industry slowdown. I always took those weeks as a recruiting firm owner as a vacation. I didn't give them off carte blanche to the team. I made them earn it. And what we called it was, we were in a contest. Here's a specific example of a contest called 5 and 4. So most years there's 4 weeks of execution of solid weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And if you're in, Europe or another part of the planet, and you don't have Thanksgiving, the 4 weeks before Christmas. But because I think universally around the globe, that Christmas week is a slow week. And the contest would always be accomplish your 5 week, what your goals were for 5 weeks and 4 weeks, and get the week between Christmas and New Year's off. Do the same thing in June between kind of Memorial Day and July 4th is usually about 4 weeks. Accomplish 5 weeks productivity in 4 weeks, get the week off. Now, productivity is not placements. Placements are always a lagging indicator of activity. So if their goal is 2 interviews a week, because 2 interviews a week gets them $300,000 a year, they do 10 interviews. They arrange 10 interviews in 4 weeks. They get the 5th week off. That's a way to do a sprint. You can also do creative things like in the summer, get Friday off by hitting your activity goal by Thursday. If you hit your activity goal by Thursday, take Friday off. These are little things that will drive up productivity into sprints. And generally, the residual of that is once someone's worked in a sprint, they probably don't revert back to the previous level of activity. But they probably don't stay at the higher level, but you're always just ratcheting it up a little. So those are some ways, some specific examples of things one can do to motivate.
Well, and there is science behind when you move that bar up a bit and then it drops back down. It never goes back down to the baseline.
Exactly.
It's a bit higher. So when you're doing these types of contests, you're incrementally leveling up your team's productivity.
And I remember, I forgot who I heard this from because I'd love to give him credit. As an owner, when you really get to a real business where you're really scaling, and there came a point where I took myself off a desk. And a lot of times people wonder, well, what is a great day? What does a great week look like for me as an owner in this role? And it really frames around, this person said to me, now that I don't have clients anymore, I mean, our company has clients, but now that I don't have individual clients anymore because I'm off a desk, my clients are my team. And my job then is to grow that client base, meaning add more people, and retain that client base. And it was just a phenomenal metaphor to think, okay, if you just think of your team members as clients, and what do you need to do to serve them at a high level so that they raise their performance, that they're happier and they enjoy coming to work, number one, and then expanding that client base with other team members.
That's great. We could probably go on for hours on this, but what are some final thoughts that you have about recruiter retention?
The main reason I see people don't hire is because they have beliefs around people wanting to work hard, beliefs around it's expensive, and beliefs around it takes too much time. And none of those have to be true. Meaning, you need to invest, say, in 90 to 120 days of a new person, because just the way our business is, the revenue from a new person is probably not going to come in for 4 months. So that's an investment. But if my experience was with somebody if they worked on my desk, meaning they sourced on my desk, $1 investment brought me back about $3 in profitability, right? So how is that expensive? And again, that even banked in the failures, meaning not 100% of the people you're going to hire are successful. So number one. Number two is it takes too much time. That's because you let it take too much time because you don't have a structured onboarding program. With a structured onboarding program, one, videos can teach the content, and then you have defined coaching times. I found in their first week was probably the heaviest. I would invest 90 minutes a day, and week 2 through the second month, it was 45 minutes a day. At the beginning of the day was the entire onboarding program. Meaning, when I ask people, well, if you could hire an onboard in 45 minutes a day, would you do that? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. They think it takes all day because there's no structure around it. Once you have structure around it, it doesn't take that long. So, and then on the work hard side, we covered that is, well, I always say to somebody who mentions that as a concern, I go, what's your accountability process? What's your onboarding program as it's defined? And almost 100% of the time, they have no accountability or no defined onboarding program. the onboarding program is if you work really hard and you do all the right things, you'll make a lot of money. Well, that's a promise without any. It's a fluff promise with no concrete foundation.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.